Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 34 of Ultimate Exotics, the review series for Gran Turismo's pretty decent selection of top tier supercars, the cars which, for fairly obvious reasons, people really like, both in real life and on Gran Turismo. I'm a big fan of supercars, not so much the latest of supercars, but this particular supercar came from a time when we were getting a lot of really good machines in the supercar category. Some new names were coming out on the scene which people hadn't heard of before. In the early 2000s, between say 2000 and 2006, a lot of fantastic supercars came out. The newer shape Zonda, the Carrera GT, the SLR, the Enzo, the MC12, and various others. Completely new companies such as Gumper even came onto the scene. Koenigsegg found their footing and became a popular name among petrol heads. This car, though, was arguably one of the most important supercars of that era because it bears the name of the founder of its company, one of the most iconic companies in the world, Ferrari, named after, of course, Enzo Ferrari. And although technically now it has been surpassed by the LaFerrari as the ultimate benchmark Ferrari, I personally still prefer the Enzo. That being said, the Enzo's not one of my favourite cars, but I definitely prefer it over the LaFerrari, which to me is just too much of a computer and has no passion compared to the Enzo. The Enzo was certainly a very technically advanced machine for Ferrari, being very close to a Formula 1 car. The LaFerrari, for me at least, has taken it a little bit too far. People are too concerned with lap times these days as far as I'm concerned, and that's not what a supercar is about. Lap times only mean so much. For the average driver, they'll very rarely visit a circuit, so who really cares how quickly it can get around Brands Hatch or Silverstone or any other track for that matter? You can boast about it, but it makes no difference when you're driving it down the street. When you take out something like an Enzo or a Carrera GT or an SLR or one of those supercars, though, you can actually enjoy it on a real road. It doesn't feel like you're driving a completely unforgiving, computerized race car, in effect. Now, if you're into that, fair enough, but I'm not. I prefer cars that are slightly simpler, not necessarily as quick, but have more passion, more character, and a style which is more dictated to by the designer's pencil than by a wind tunnel. Call me old-fashioned, but I prefer that. Now, the Enzo on Gran Turismo is a very strong supercar, not just in a straight line, but also around the circuit. It's powered by a mid-mounted 6-litre V12 engine, the same engine, in fact, used in one of my favourite cars, the Maserati MC12. Here's hoping we'll get that on Gran Turismo at some point. And the engine has pretty decent tuning limitations. Generally, the Italian supercars on the game, such as the Lambos, Maseratis and Ferraris, don't tend to be that strong for top-end performance. The Maserati, for instance, that's on the game, isn't that strong for top speed. Most of the Ferraris aren't that amazing. The FXXs and the Enzo is. Apart from that, not many of the others are that amazing for their power. The Lamborghinis, apart from the Diablo and the Reventon, all the others are significantly slower than many other supercars, and even some super sports cars. So the fact that the Enzo is as quick as it is, makes it very useful. It also makes an excellent circuit racer as well as just a straight line machine, which also helps to make it a better all-round supercar. Now that 6-litre engine can be tuned up, despite being naturally aspirated, to a very impressive 979 horsepower and 640 foot-pounds of torque, which is a pretty decent amount of torque given that Ferraris typically don't have particularly torquey engines. They're generally more rev-happy, power-hungry engines, similar to a motorbike engine where they like to be pushed hard to get the best out of them, and torque doesn't really matter so much. Not the case in the Enzo, though. It has plenty of torque, especially given that it only weighs 1,081 kilos, so it's got very little weight to push. It's a lot lighter than many of the other supercars in the game. It puts out 906 horsepower per tonne, which is pretty impressive given that it doesn't actually even have 1,000 horsepower, which is far less than many of the other horsepower-hungry supercars in the game have. The Enzo is in fact one of the least powerful supercars in its class, but given that power, it can cruise at well over 290 under its own power. The acceleration is also fantastic, especially off the line, which is surprising given that it is a rear-wheel drive car, which would usually, especially from a high-revving V12, produce rampant wheel spin. And thankfully, that attribute is also carried over to the FXX, which is insanely fast off the line for a rear-wheel drive car. As far as price, the Enzo costs 1 million credits, which I would say is brilliant value. It's expensive enough to be appropriate, to be respectful to the car and to the brand, and to honour the car's value in real life, being a similar price to what you'd expect to pay for an Enzo around this kind of time. At the same time though, it's not stupidly expensive. It's still half the price of a Veyron, significantly cheaper than a 177 or a Huayra, and I would say that that's pretty good value overall, considering how good it is. Around the track, it can easily outpace the Veyron. In a straight line, it can, with the right driver and the right tuning, beat most of the other supercars in the game for sheer acceleration, and in many cases for top speed as well. But around the track, as I already said, it can easily beat the Veyron, but it can also be tuned to beat, again, most of the other supercars. There are very, very few supercars on Gran Turismo which are genuinely as brilliant all round as the Enzo is. And I'm not even a huge fan of the car, but you have to admit, it is an amazing supercar, a benchmark for Ferrari, and that's probably one of the reasons why I don't consider the LaFerrari to be the new benchmark Ferrari. It's just not enough of a step forward from the Enzo. The Enzo was a massive step up from the F50, as was the F50 from the F40. But the LaFerrari just doesn't feel far enough ahead yet. It's fast, but the Enzo was a pretty amazing machine to beat. Visually, it's a little bit controversial, and I can understand that. Some people think it's not as good looking as a Ferrari should be, and it certainly is a very technical looking machine. But one thing is for sure, if you're looking for a strong all-round supercar, check out the Enzo. But that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.